Good afternoon. Welcome to the Kent County Public Schools Board of Education Board Work Session for July 22nd, 2021. The first item on the agenda this afternoon is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening as presented?
So moved.
We have a motion by Dr. Costa. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Sullivan. Any conversation, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. The next item on the agenda is to move to closed session. The Kent County Public Schools Board of Education members of this board, Dr. Karen Couch, the superintendent, Mr. Dan Hushin, supervisor of human resources, and Gail Manley, executive assistant to the superintendent, will move to closed session under General Provisions Article 3-305B, Section 1, to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, as well as any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals. Do we have a motion to move into closed session?
I motion that we move into closed session.
We have a motion by Trish McGee. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Dr. Costa. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. We'll move into closed session and look to be back in open session at 5 p.m. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Kent County Public Schools Board of Education, Thursday, July 22nd, 2021 Board Work Session. I'd like to call this meeting back into order. The first item on the agenda as we're coming out of closed session is to report on closed session. The Kent County Public Schools Board of Education members of this board, Dr. Karen Couch, the superintendent, Mr. Dan Hutchin, supervisor of human resources, and Gail Manley, executive assistant to the superintendent, met in closed session under General Provisions Article 3-305B, excuse me, to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, as well as any other personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals. This session was for information and discussion purposes only. No action was taken. Personnel actions will be voted upon by this board immediately after the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Buckle, would you lead us in that, please? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda this evening is personnel. Mr. Hutchin.
Thank you, President Getz, Dr. Couch. Each month, the school board receives and reviews a monthly report of stated personnel actions. In this report, administrative, supervisory personnel, teachers, and supporting services, and the terminations appointment are all discussed. In open session, the board votes approval of these actions for certificated staff. All other actions are for information only. The administration seeks approval for the stated personnel actions.
As Mr. Hutchin noted, this is an action item for this evening. Do we have a motion to approve the stated personnel actions?
I move that we approve the stated personnel actions.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Dr. Costa. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you.
If you would just give me a moment, Mr. Getz. At the last board meeting, we approved the new hire for the assistant principal at the middle school. He's here this evening, so I wanted to take the opportunity to
Great.
introduce him. Rondell Sorrell, would you kind of stand up?
Welcome and thank you. Thanks for coming tonight.
Okay.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Kerwin Implementation Coordinator.
Yes. You have before you a memorandum stating that, oh yeah, it's the right one. I thought for a second it was the wrong memo. This is a memorandum seeking for approval for the Kerwin Implementation Coordinator. In discussion with the county commissioners, we made the decision that we would have interim Kerwin Implementation Coordinators. I checked with the DLS and asked if that was possible, and they said it was absolutely possible. So, excuse me?
I was going to say, are we supposed to have that memorandum?
It's on Board Docs.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I thought you meant it was,
No,
okay.
it's on Board Docs.
Gotcha.
So the administration recommends that Pat Merritt, Kent County CFO, would be a co-interim Kerwin Implementation Coordinator with myself, Dr. Karen Couch, and so we would serve as the coordinators. It looks like they're probably going to have a meeting within the next couple weeks, and so we would both be attending meetings from this point forward. And so it's my recommendation that you take that and approve those recommendations.
Okay, this is an action item. We are looking for a motion, as Dr. Couch had stated. Do we have a motion to do so?
Can I ask a question before there's a motion? I listened to the county commissioner meeting the other day. Do we have any idea how long the interim period will last?
I'm assuming it's probably, my my discussion with the county commissioners is that as soon as the AIB board is put together, which is the Accountability
Accountability.
and Implementation Board, as soon as they're they're assembled and they name all of the membership of that board, they will come up with roles and responsibilities for the implementation coordinator, and then I think that'll give us a better idea in terms of what skill set we're going to have for those individuals that will be serving in those roles across all jurisdictions. So until that time, I really just don't know. I'm thinking that the interim potentially will be for a year. I don't think there's a lot of things that we have to do in the year, but I don't know, because there's just so many things I don't know about what the roles and responsibilities are going to be for this position. I think it's going to give both the county and the school system a very good idea of what's going to be needed, and then we can revisit and make a determination if it can be somebody internally or if we have to go external.
So I'm going to ask a question that may be not answered until all the other things are answered, but let's say once the interim is removed and it's not you, but it's somebody in our school system, is that going to be an additional expense? I mean, will that be extra pay for extra duty, or are we going to hire somebody to have that job?
Yeah, those are all
Okay.
questions I don't have answers for.
Okay.
The administration is recommending approval of this implementation coordinator co-chair format. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve it.
We have a motion by Dr. Costa. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second by Ms. Sullivan. Any further comments? Questions? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you.
Very good.
Okay, the next portion of the meeting is the board work session. Just a reminder, this is a dialogue between board members and the administration. There will be time after this portion, Section 6, for public participation. So, Dr. Couch, I'll open up the work session to you, please.
Okay. So one of the things that we talked about at our retreat was scheduling additional work sessions throughout the year so that we could have an opportunity to spend more time on our data, our academic achievement data, talk about our academic goals, and then just see, have more time to talk about our progress monitoring and where we are throughout the year, instead of having a meeting where we're talking about it one or two times during the year. We're actually talking about it, and it's front and center, and that's something that's going to be, a major goal for the school system. So what we wanted to do is set the stage today and talk about what are we doing different. We know that we can't continue to do the same things that we've always been doing and expect different results. So we want to spend some time talking about what we've done in the last year in terms of getting ready and having a very strong start at the beginning of the school year. So we're going to talk about a lot of the things that we are planning to do different, talking about, in terms of our strategic plan, our 4 overarching strategies, and how do those new things that we've got planned fit into those strategies. Go over our achievement data, and then talk about setting targets for the coming year in terms of where we want to be with regard to improving academic achievement in the school system. So with that, we do have a PowerPoint that we wanted to go through and begin talking about our academic achievement data, where we are, and then we'll end by talking about setting targets for FY22. We do invite board members to stop, ask questions if you have them. This is a work session. This is an opportunity outside of a regular board meeting. We do have the business of a regular board meeting, so this is an opportunity to have fluid discussion and dialogue and talk about the things that you might be wondering about or things that don't make sense. So this is a presentation, but it's really more of a dialogue and an opportunity for us to have our talking points and to be clear about where we are in the Kent County Public Schools. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gina Giacomowitz.
Good evening, President Getz, Dr. Couch, members of the board.
Good evening.
We appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with you our hopes and our commitments for this school year. And just to piggyback on what Dr. Couch said a moment ago, we hope to make it very clear in terms of the direction that we will be moving with what will be different as we approach the 2021-2022 school year. You can see in the audience, we have the members of, several members from our administrative team. When we work on both our strategic plan as well as our school improvement plans, all of our efforts are aligned to the mission and vision of our district. The words that you set forth as an administrative board really drive the work that we do. And those words are chosen very carefully. When we think about our mission, we know that it's really wrapped around that environment of academic excellence. So you'll see in our work today what we're doing differently in terms of trying to see that all students can reach their full potential, which is exactly the vision that we have. When we think about moving forward, our vision is that our students will graduate equipped to achieve their highest potential. So keeping those things in mind, Dr. Couch shared with you that we spent quite a bit of time over the past year really reflecting about those pillars that are part of our strategic plan. We're referencing equity, communication, data, as well as innovation. These are the 4 pillars that really hold up the structure of our organization. So through that lens, we'd like to talk about what will be different. Every single meeting, whether it's administrative, principal-led at the school, or simply teacher-to-teacher staff meetings, are centered around the use of data. It is the data both at the system level and the individual student level that drives the discussions. What's different about this year is that we have faster and easier access based on the tools that have been purchased to allow us to examine that data, disaggregate it. So we're able to look at student groups even after administering something such as a formative assessment, which would be maybe at the end of a math unit. When you take that assessment, at a teacher's fingertip, they'll be able to look at their class and have quick analysis. As a principal, you'll get that school at a glance. We've had that before, but we've never had it where we can look at it and break it down that quickly at the student group level. Collaboration is not something new for Kent County. In fact, that's something that we've engaged in for a number of years. But what's different about the 21-22 school year is the commitment at the elementary level to allow our grade level teams to continue to meet across all schools. That's been a challenge in the past when we're back face-to-face. We know that when we go to school face-to-face and teachers are placed across this district, if you call a meeting at 2:30, you lose an hour just by getting together. So we are going to continue to take advantage of the platform that we have. Everyone's familiar with Schoology. That's one piece. But we've also become very well-versed in using Google Meets and different tools to allow us to continue that type of collaboration. At the secondary level, there are actually dates selected and continued collaboration for vertical dialogue, which is really going to help us with that commitment to improve the specific content areas. When you're the only Algebra 1 teacher sitting alone in the middle school and you never have an opportunity to meet with the high school teachers, that's a challenge. What's different about this school year is that there is a commitment for that vertical dialogue to continue on a regular basis. The third bullet in terms of this is that commitment to our new curriculum. When we say new, in the area of English language arts, we have used the Wonders, and that was adopted actually the first year that Dr. Couch was on board as superintendent at the elementary level. That had been the first curriculum after 17 years, and we sat there, and that was a big celebration. Well, it's time now to do a renewal again and a refresh. So what's different this year is we're now purchasing the updated version, which what that brings with us are tools that are targeted for differentiation, right at your fingertips. I know that even 5 years ago, when we talked about doing guided reading in the classroom, it became tricky because it's hard to get 5 sets of the same text repeatedly at varied levels right at a teacher's fingertips. Well, with the newer version, you have that digital access, and all of our students have the tools, such as iPads and Chromebooks. This is very different moving in back face-to-face from what we've ever had before. We have also been investing in our teachers having time throughout last year and continuing this summer with the development of what we call our local curriculum. So what I'd like to share at this time is just a sample so you can kind of get a view of what that looks like. So what you see here is the home page for the Kent County Public Schools curriculum. When you adopt a new resource such as a textbook, it gives you an idea of everything you need to teach within a unit, but then our teachers need to put their own expertise and touch into what that will look like in terms of picking and choosing what matters most within a specific grade level. So for example, if we were to open grade 1 in here, you'll see that our, and I apologize, I always have a hard time. So, Bill, I have to go to the bottom of it to be able to. Okay, bear with me. There we go. On the bottom, you will see quick links to the various content areas. When they click on the area of English Language Arts, we have something that's called a quick look. This is a common template that was developed by our teachers, our staff, and it's the same language that's used across all levels, elementary, middle, and high school. So when you open up a quick look, as a new teacher to a grade level, you'll get quick access to both the pacing that you should be following within that quick look, as well as specifics within the breakdown of a unit. So each one of these, grade by grade, you can go in, you click on it, you take a look at a grade, and then you'll also have something that will take you to a unit at a glance, which again, I think I might be clicking too fast to go through this, I apologize. The unit at a glance will give the specificity in terms of lesson outcomes, unit assessments, and the actual tools for differentiation. I don't know if anyone else does this, but I'm having a hard time presenting and maneuvering it at the same time, so I apologize. Give me just a minute. See if I can get it. I wonder if I'm just clicking too many times. Okay. There we go. Here we go. This is an example of second grade, the first unit, and then within that unit, again, the work of our staff together is something called a template for a year at a glance. And during their professional learning communities, the teams work together, and that's where they identify, based on the pacing that they have within their classroom, the standards, both the major and minor, the foundational skills, and they are linking actual digital links to the text that they need just to make this a little bit easier and faster access. So I could continue to click on the links, but I'm afraid I might get lost in there. But this is something that we can share with each and every one of you. Again, it breaks down the key vocabulary within a lesson. Let me continue to show you. And then we have other considerations in there for differentiation. It has a template that would allow a teacher, new or experienced, to write their own choice, what they are focusing on in terms of that learning experience. And then we also have common formative assessments. And those assessments are housed in a new platform called Edulastic, which we'll show in a few moments. But it is that tool, that is another tool that's new to our teachers and our staff this year in helping to be able to break down that data in terms of giving it a glance through the lens of equity.
Gina, are
Yes.
we, or have you already held training or professional development on the new programs with teachers and staff?
So the document itself, that we've not been on the site.
Okay.
So in the past, we've shared the template digitally through the drive. We've just gone in and shared, but we've never had what we call a hub, one site where you can go in and see, have access to literacy, math, and all other resources in one hub. So that's new this year, and that will be shared when we have the back to school dates. That's part of that training. We have time dedicated to that.
Will any of this be rolled out during the academies that are coming out, or is this just for when school starts?
That's a great question. So during the academies, they will have, teachers have access to this at all times. So it's not as though they wouldn't be able to use the resources that are available. But for the purpose of the summer, and those of you that are not familiar, we're very excited about another piece that's different for this summer is we're holding our very first academic academies across all schools. And what the teachers have done for that is they've chosen specific focus standards. So when you look at a curriculum for a year, there's way too much there to really make meaning of it within a quick 16-day program. So in our summer academies, they're focused more on specific focus standards that were based on the data from the end of the year. So they're actually using a different pacing for the summer academy, if that makes sense. All right, and I'd like to invite my colleague, Dr. Sperry is going to join me to share a little bit about some things that are different in terms of communication.
Good evening.
Good evening.
President Getz, Dr. Couch, members of the board, visitors. So the second pillar that we are looking at today is the communication pillar. Very important to us. So we have three primary changes that we would like to make. One is to increase family and community engagement around school system improvement, an acknowledgement that we are a school system that seeks to and must improve, and increased opportunities to make that happen, both at the school and at the district levels. What we are hoping will happen, planning to facilitate in the coming years, two-way communication. So not just more opportunities for us to spill out what it is that we think we're doing, but also more opportunities to hear from families and community partners what it is that you feel we need to be doing. So there are plans at the district and school level to increase those opportunities. And I can come back to what some of those are if that's helpful.
Please.
Built into our newest ESSER funding is a coordinator for public relations, who will be a person at the board with multiple skills, who will be able to coordinate a lot of the information and the ways that we disseminate it. One of the things we hear often is we might not be maximizing technologies, and there might be folk who don't get their information from technology. And we have an obligation to reach all of those people, to invite them and to share information. So the coordinator for public relations will help with that work. And also just increasing the frequency with which we communicate in both directions. Third thing we hope to do is expanded communication through multiple methods. Much more information about the work that we're doing with transparency, much more information about the work that we're doing, the successes we're achieving, and the challenges that we're facing, and hoping to build enough of a relationship to be able to share those challenges in a caring community, which is what this is, in a way that we can work together to embrace it. If you'd like any specifics about any of these, we've only begun to talk about these ideas, but I'm happy to share what I know.
Can you give some examples of that first thing, family and community engagement?
So I know that Dr. Couch has spoken, you all have spoken about doing a work session, a board meeting and a work session, perhaps as often as monthly, so that there would be more opportunities. And learning as we go through those work sessions, what are the best formats to do those, so that we can actually interact with one another. So increasing those. I can speak to the middle school. In August, we will host an evening inviting parents to come in. We'd like to share, before we finalize anything, we'd like to share our data, our school goals for the year, and get input from community. Are those the goals you wish for us to seek? Are there other priorities you see that we should be putting above these? And that for us, we've always had school improvement team meetings, but I don't know that we've done it. We're hoping that we get a broad swath of the community in to share their expectations with us. I believe all of the schools have varying plans depending on the school to sort of increase opportunities beyond the standard things. There are many. There are PTAs, you mentioned that, Francois, at the last meeting. There are other ways. But if those ways aren't getting the information flowing in both directions, we are all committing to adding various ways to do that, if that's helpful.
Dr. Sperry, these school teams, who make up those teams? Are they just administrative? Are they
No.
teachers, or is it
So the school
cross-functional?
improvement team at the middle school does have parent involvement. It's minimal. Right now, I would be happy to invite more parents to be part of the school improvement team, and we will put out an open invitation. Teachers representative of the school and representatives of other roles in the school.
Thank you.
That's who's on the school improvement team now.
Are those is that part of a Title I requirement to have the school improvement teams, or?
It is part of a Title I requirement. We marry the two, so we're not creating a Title I plan and a school plan. We create a plan that marries the two.
We had a very popular a few years ago, the open house community event at the rec center in Wharton, where we invited the community organizations to come, and I think people really enjoyed that, and I hope that we can find a way to do that again.
Sure. And one of the suggestions that was made today, actually by Rondell, our new person, I keep pointing him out, is that perhaps we need to move this meeting that we're thinking about for August off campus, and that perhaps it would be better to host it elsewhere as a new tradition, in case there are folk who have not had positive experiences in school or coming to school. And I think that is certainly something that we are exploring. The commitment today is to greatly expand those opportunities. We are fleshing out the details as we go. So, the next slide deals with the next pillar, which is, am I moving this? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Poor. Is the pillar of innovation, which is sort of a curious word. What does it mean? But it is one of the 4 pillars. So we are looking at very specific ways of doing responsible change, responsible in terms of responding to our data, and responsible in terms of making sure we're measuring as we go whether the change is effective or not. That will help us with modifications and also with scaling. If we attempt something new and it seems to be working splendidly, then we should grow it. If we attempt something new and it is working less splendidly, then we should step away or find a way to modify it. So one of those innovations is creative instructional design. All of the schools, I believe, in some way, shape, or form, K through 8 at any rate, have found ways to increase time in the various academic subjects where it's needed. So at the middle school, and again, I'm sorry, I'm limited to the middle school, but we have offered 90 minutes of reading at the 6th grade now for a number of years, and our reading scores have we have made actual measurable gains in reading. This year, we are offering also 90 minutes in math, because our data say clearly to us we are better at teaching reading than we are at teaching math. And so we're doing a schedule revision that will help with that. All of the
Dr.
schools.
Spear, I don't mean to cut you off,
No,
but you keep, is it possible, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, you say you're limited to middle school. Is there going to be an opportunity we hear from an elementary principal who could also talk to the point of instructional?
I see them. I believe so.
Instructional design. I don't mean to cut you off, but.
No, I
you
believe
know.
so. I believe so. So we are looking at instructional design to use the resources of time and people in smarter ways given our data. We are expanding, Gina spoke to this a moment ago, we are expanding teacher collaboration. We are maintaining expanded collaboration across grade levels at the elementary school, also among grade levels, so we can see how kids are doing as they move, and vertical alignment 6 through 12. So one of the things we will be doing much more of is articulating the secondary program in the various content areas 6 through 12. And we have a couple of daring plans for ways that we might be able to make that happen. We have continued to increase and will continue to increase wraparound services and support. An example of that already underway is the play groups this summer. But the ESSER funding and other attention to the social emotional needs of kids in this time has given us many opportunities. So we are stepping up our game in terms of the supports that we are able to offer our families and our kids. We also are looking at, Gina alluded to this as well, enhanced summer and after-school programming. Francois, I can answer your question for the academy that I know at least one of your children is attending. We have created in the middle school curriculum, Gina showed you the quick look. So we have created, because we had some time in the spring for professional development because of the COVID scheduling. So we have actually created at each grade level something called a Unit 0, which is a really fast, intensive way for us to assess where are the kids coming to us. We're doing some state testing that'll give us some data early, but we want to get to know who our kids are and what they can do very quickly. So the Unit 0 will precede we added it to the front of our quick looks this year in response to the pandemic. Our summer program and the summer programs at the elementary schools are designed to address areas of need that we have determined are areas of need. So the middle school programming is civil rights and fractions, environmental science and fractions, social justice and fractions. We have not taught fractions well. And so the project-based program that we are doing is designed to address a need that we know exists, if that's helpful. But they will not be beginning the next year's curriculum in that summer program. We're not starting there. In part, your enrollment is higher at the elementary level I have 70 students probably beginning a week from Monday out of about slightly over 400. So I can't start the real curriculum until I have all of the kids, but I can help those 70 kids get ready to engage in it. So,
Can you talk a little bit more about if there is collaboration among the schools for the social emotional health? We're coming off of a pretty crazy year, and I think kids need that extra lift. But also I think our counselors and social workers need some collaboration time as well. Are they able to do that?
they are. Part of our plan it's been ongoing. Tracy brings the counselors together often and will continue to do so. But we have a plan that we're beginning to look at for the back-to-school week, bringing all of the counselors together to do something sort of unusual, to build community among them and to address the very real need. I believe at all of the schools, and again, Mr. Johnson, I'll get someone elementary to come up. But I know at our school, we are actually adjusting our schedule for next year and doing a social emotional program, a cell program that we discovered as part of our Trojan Influence after school program. So every student will participate twice a week in a program called Positive Action, well received by kids and teachers during our Trojan Influence. We're going to do for the first 9 weeks of school, we're going to engage every student Monday morning, Friday afternoon in that program. And then we're going to ask teachers and students to assess, does everybody continue to need to do this, or can we do just targeted kids at that time? And it could be that program continues all year, but I was afraid to leave the social emotional curriculum to chance after the pandemic, and I know the elementary schools have similar plans to increase and increase the number of students who are engaged readily, automatically in those programs. So,
I have a quick question.
Sure.
What's the high school's plan?
Mr. Graff?
I haven't had a chance to meet with our new social worker yet. She comes in next week. We have a meeting next Wednesday with our new social worker to be able to put a plan into place in terms of social immersion learning going forward.
And typically, Sam, what happens at the high school level is that there's a needs assessment done, and that's done with all of the teachers, and there's communication between saying, basically asking a series of questions about what kind of needs and patterns are you seeing with your students. And that's when your counselor and or your social worker pull those small groups based on the needs that data represents.
Are you going to continue with Challenge Day
We have plans to, yes.
this year? Good.
So before we leave this slide, the other piece that I just wanted to mention is, as part of the wraparound services, this year we hired someone new as an outreach person, and particularly for Hispanic families and our English language learners. So Anna Padilla has actually been working with us, and she has, at this point, is 20 hours a week. And what will be different moving forward is that will be a full-time position. So she is over the moon about it, and since her initial entrance into that position, we have had more support and more families come out and participate, both in school events, but also ongoing communication with administrators, teachers, as well as at the district level. So I think think that's been a nice increase in involvement and something different that we continue to expand and improve. We started the 4 pillars by talking about equity, and this one ties right back to the beginning, and that is the commitment to student group progress monitoring. We have always done progress monitoring when we administer any type of assessment. The whole goal is to go in, you give the assessment, you take a look at how your class is doing, and you use that information to adjust and provide small group instruction. What we have not had is what I mentioned earlier, is to have at our fingertips the quick access to be able to look at that through a different lens in terms of perhaps students with IEPs or students that are English language learners. You'll be able to see the different student groups on a need-to-know basis for the teacher only, so that they, again, can go in and address those needs in a timely fashion.
I just need clarification.
Yes.
Can you make that make sense to me? Because to me, that we have been doing, I'm still missing what's different besides having that access. But for me as a teacher, progress monitoring is something we do daily. I should already know what my groups of students and how they're doing and be able to see the data up close and then figure out. So what's different from what I'm still missing what's different. I think that's where I'm confused.
Correct. So what my explanation, maybe it wasn't very clear, is that the tool will provide quicker and easier access. So our teachers, as I stated earlier, have always been responsible for progress monitoring, but it was done in a very tedious way, student by hand, trying to figure that out. So now it's the ease of access to that to be able to respond more rapidly and more timely to those needs. So if you gave an assessment at the end of a unit, it may take you 4 days to be able to get through, sort that data, and then respond to it, whereas this will give you immediate feedback.
So really, it's just more so dealing with just putting data in. I mean, them taking the assessment, I'm guessing, usability of it. So really, so that's what we're doing. That's the biggest difference.
That's the difference for that first bullet, the timeliness and the immediacy to be able to respond to the data. The benchmark data is something that is new. We have had access to some unit assessments, but we have not had clear benchmark data that we've been able to measure as a school system in both literacy and math. So this year, as I think most of us, well, I know our board as well as our administrators are aware, I'm not sure that all the guests know, we have purchased something called Illustrative Mathematics. That is a new core curriculum, kindergarten all the way through the high school level Algebra 1. And so the illustrative math also gives us access to benchmark data, again, with our intention of being able to more closely monitor, make those adjustments, and be able to be responsive to the results that we're getting, and not wait until that autopsy data where it comes in later and you feel like there's nothing you can do about it.
So my question is, when we say benchmark, we're talking right at the beginning of the year.
There is benchmark, the early fall assessment from the state, so that will be part of what we administer, but this benchmark data is responding specifically to core curriculum benchmark.
So my question is how, again, I guess I'm stuck on the notion about what we were doing to for example, to even create, what were we basing our instructional groups, our instructional lessons off at the beginning of the school year? Were we just using data from this the latest state testing? Are we using data from MAP? Are we using, I see what we're doing now. So
I understand what you're saying. So, yes, so previously we had access to the MAP assessment, Measures of Academic Progress, and we did give that 3 times a year. That's what's considered to be our universal screener, and we will continue to do the Measures of Academic Progress. That gives us that quick, broad glance, and that's actually, we're going to go in and share some of the results of that. That's data to help us look both at big picture, but it can also go down to the individual student data. The benchmark data is more directly tied to the grade level standards that they're teaching at that time. So it's a more closer link to the actual instruction that's happening in that class compared to the broad sweep of a grade level, how they're doing when compared to national norms. Does that make sense? So it's a little bit different. Common formative assessments. Again, that is not a new term to Kent County Public Schools, but the tool, the Edge Elastic, is the new piece. And so what will happen in there is our teachers felt very strongly that there was a disconnect. We, at the state level, have something called public release items. So there are assessments such as public release from previous given PARC assessments, public release from previously given MESA, the Maryland Science Assessment. But they were always, you either had to have a paper copy or you had to go in item by item and try to cut and paste and put it into our data platform that we had before. Edulastic has everything. It's so easy to use. And so our teachers, this was something that we had feedback from them. And so all of the public release items are readily available at their fingertips. But more importantly, they can go in there and there are item banks, and based on what we see, the most closely aligned with the Maryland standards that we've ever seen. So teachers can go in, put a standard in, and it will give them public release items that are aligned to that standard, and they can build their own assessment at their fingertips. So this is really something that teachers felt would be such a useful tool to be able to use on their own in the classroom to be more data-driven, and they do that. The last bullet is something that we talked about at great length as an administrative team. I'm looking to our principal team, and that is data transparency with stakeholders. Some of our community members attended a very special event last time the middle school was back together in a normal way. You may remember it. There was a data and dessert night. I should let you tell the story. But basically, Dr. Speary just pretty much laid it out there. You know, here's the performance of our school and our students. And she served chocolates, that did bring a few people in. And so they wanted to talk about, you know, let's put our heads together. What can we do? This is what we know. And they defined that problem of practice and then made a plan for moving forward to address that. Sharing the data is something that we feel we can do a better job in terms of communicating that. So our commitment publicly to you tonight is that we want to make sure that we are being as transparent as we can with all stakeholders with the data. And that means more frequent communication in the classroom, in the school, and also at the district. So that's across all levels. The data and dessert was just an example of what that might look like. So again, these are the 4 pillars that really drive the work that we're doing, and hopefully we were able to share a few examples of some of the activities and commitments that will be very different this year than what we have done in the past.
I like the idea that data is going to be shared with us more often, because what's happened is we get it at the end of the year, and then it's too late, at least for us, to address it other than to be cranky like I was 2 weeks ago and just say, you know, what's going on here? I mean, if I'm going to be cranky, I want to be cranky in an opportunity that we can pivot and improve things.
And absolutely. So the frequency of the sharing of data has to improve, and that's exactly what we're saying here. The next portion of our presentation, we'd like to go into a little bit of detail. We're going to share some, what I just called a moment ago, autopsy data. So we'll share with you some very old data, as well as some new data that we gave this past spring. So we'd like to share that with you. Before we do, just to set the stage, what you have in front of you is called a pyramid model. And this is really key in terms of driving our thinking and our decision making. And it has to do with a way that we as administrators approach our work, with tier 1 meaning most of the students within our school are successful with the core work that we're providing, that instruction that we're providing. If we're doing an effective job with our work, 80% of the students are going to be successful with that. Tier 2 are students that may need some support within the classroom, that targeted small group. And tier 3 are perhaps those that learn differently or need some additional at-risk support, whether it be a 504 plan, an IEP. They may need some sort of intensive individual intervention. Sometimes it's on the behavioral side, sometimes it's on the academic side. But Dr. Speary is going to say a few more things about the pyramid, and then she'll share the beginning of our academic data as well. A blast from the past.
The fun job, the data. So just a couple of things about this pyramid. This is the approach to instruction that is used most widely of all the various ways to teach kids around the country. The assumption that if you're Tier 1 instruction, which is the instruction that all kids get, that teachers plan for as reflected in the curriculum, should reach about 80% of the students. There will be a small number, 15%, who might need a second dose, a reteach, material presented in a different way, and then Tier 3 again is that tiny number. What begins to happen if your Tier 1 instruction is not strong, and clearly from the data I'm about to present, 80% of our students are not learning from that Tier 1 instruction. What begins to happen is a cycle where you're funneling a tremendous amount of teacher time and resource into making up for that through Tier 2 and Tier 3. So many of the interventions, many of the changes that you saw in response to the 4 pillars or organized by the 4 pillars address that Tier 1 instruction. What are we doing for all students? That does not lessen our responsibility to individual students, and one of the blessings of being in Kent County is scale and size, candidly. I have a middle school full of students I can call by name, which does not happen everywhere, and I know how many of them learn. They're even better at that at the elementary school. So I feel like focusing on the Tier 1 will be sort of helpful. We're going to present some data. The last state testing data was spring of 2019. So that is a long time ago. No testing after the interruption in 2020, no testing last year. At the time that we interrupted, Maryland was shifting its state test, moving away from PARCC to a test of its own design, MCAP. We have never administered MCAP because of the timing of the pandemic and that change. So in the fall of this year, beginning in a very early window, September 13th, Maryland is issuing, there's an acronym, Gina, that I don't know.
EFA, Early Fall Assessment.
EFA, Early Fall Assessment, sorry, is administering, beginning September 13th, is administering actually the state tests from the previous year. So my 6th graders will take the 5th grade test, the 4th graders will take the 3rd grade test. Likewise, MISA, the state science test, which is normally given in 5th and 8th grade, will be given this year to freshmen at the high school and to 6th graders at the middle school. It's an abbreviated test. It's very short. It is our first look at the new Maryland state test. And some of the data I'm going to show you, you're going to see why we think that matters so much and why we are planning to do it as early as possible.
May I jump in with the
Sure.
KRA?
Yeah,
That was because
that's okay.
whatever. Thank you for
I
being-
just want to be mindful of the time. I just want to be real mindful of the time because we're running
Okay.
long.
So this is not new. This is these are the results of the kindergarten readiness assessment, which our kindergartners took in the fall of 2019, and the results were released in the spring of 2020. And what we notice as we're sharing this quick graph is that Kent County has 54 students reaching proficiency in terms of kindergarten readiness the last time we assessed using this particular test. And we use this information because what we know is that
54%, not 54 students.
54%.
Right.
Did I say students?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry. 54%. And what we know about this is that that is a strong start for early learning. One of the things that we believe really makes a difference in the early years is the commitment to the full-day pre-K programs, as well as the very intentional wraparound services that we not only provided early on, but really intensified during the pandemic. You heard about the outreach that was done with teachers providing that, bringing the supplies and the materials, sending home books to our little ones, and even in kindergarten, continuing as much as possible with that remote instruction. So the reality is, in this slide, that 54% of all kindergartners in 2019-2020 school year performed at a level where they were ready for kindergarten. This was higher than the state level. However, it still clearly shouts the story that it's not all students ready to learn. The other thing, as we look at the subgroup data, is that we notice that across the subgroups, with African American students, Hispanic students, the SWD stands for students with disabilities, there is a gap between how all students performing and how our student groups are performing. So part of the description of what we are doing differently is in response to recognizing that these gaps are there, and these are the commitments that we've made to address the gaps. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go quickly, but give you the information as well.
So I'm going to drum up our most recent PARC data, state testing data, which is actually, as I said, from 2019. The first slide you see, and I know these are difficult to read, is the performance of students in districts in grades 3 through 8 on the reading test. That's the first slide, and the percentage of kids who were proficient. Our proficiency rate, students 3 through 8th grade, was 33.1%. State average was 43.7%, and you can see on the list where we fall in the range of 23 school districts. So closer to the bottom, certainly, than to the top. That's 2019. And this is all students, not disaggregated in any way by student group. The next slide you see is the 10th grade ELA test that was given in 2019. Notice our students move up slightly above the state average in the ranking, 42.7% proficient. They do not test in the 9th grade, so there are 2 years to prepare kids for that 10th grade test, and that matters a great deal. I'm going quickly, and then I'll pause for any kind of questions. The next slide that you have is our performance on the math test in 2019 in grades 3 through 8. Notice that we were 17.9% proficient, and if you look off to the side, next to the 17.9, you see a down arrow and 7.5. That means between the previous year's testing and this one, we fell that many percentage points. If you were to go back to the ELA, you're going to see a flat arrow, which means those data were pretty consistent across a couple of years. So for whatever reasons, in 2019, we had a decline. Notice we are certainly closer to the bottom in this one than to the top, and we are below the state average. The next page shows you the algebra scores for Kent County, and this would be algebra either in the 8th grade or at whatever year that it's taken. So algebra in the middle or the high school. 23.9% proficient, which actually, if you watch the up arrow, showed a gain of 6.2% that year in algebra scores, below the state, slightly below the state average, and moving slightly further up. If you turn the page, there's an interesting circle graph. This is the 8th grade students who take algebra and as 8th graders. In this year, 2019, 94% of the kids who took the algebra assessment as 8th graders, because they took an accelerated course, were proficient, and 6% were not. And the thing to remember is the number you saw before, the 33% proficient in algebra, includes this 94% plus whatever happened at the high school. So this slide suggests that for at least some of our students, achievement is happening. And one of the things that we are very curious to do is to figure out what is it that the teachers of those students are doing, again, the responsible innovation, that we can replicate in other classrooms in the school. So that is sort of our MCAP, ancient PARC data. I'll pause there to see if anyone has any questions about those data. I believe you've seen these before. They're pretty old.
Yeah.
Right. They're the most recent we have, but they're not current data. Wendy.
I was talking to a young man today who's going into 7th grade and at the middle school, very smart. He only has to read one book this summer. It seems to me that these reading scores would go up if kids were reading more. A lot of reading is just practice, like anything else. Why do they only have to read one book in the whole summer?
Well, I think we require one book, but we encourage many other
Why
books.
don't we require 6 books or 2 books?
I don't
you
know. We
I mean-
could require more books. We have a number of students who don't read the required 1 book in the summer.
I'm
I mean,
sure.
what we need to be doing is encouraging that young man to read more, whether we're requiring it or not. But we certainly could raise our expectations there.
I mean, I can speak on behalf of a student that when we do summer projects and specifically reading, I've never been graded on any of the essays, any of the assignments, any of that that's actually happened from teachers until I went to honors English at the high school and then of course AP Lang. So, I mean, maybe it's just kind of,
You don't have to do it.
yeah. So numerous students I know just don't do it because if you don't read the book, there's no consequence.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to consider. Other questions about Park from 2019?
Just looking at the data and just sort of a general, even if you look at the percentage of the district that has the highest percentage of performers, the numbers are low. Is there sort of a statewide initiative to improve things across the state and to
I think the statewide initiative is we're not giving Park anymore.
Yeah.
Candidly, there were a number of Park states when they started. It was a consortium that dwindled down. Among the Park states, Maryland has not fared well comparatively. And there was a sense that because the test was so arduous to administer and the results were so slow to return, we couldn't really use it effectively for its intended consequence. So MCAP is a better.
The Striving Readers Grant was an example of the state's commitment to support the area of literacy. And although we had to apply for the grant, it also resulted, you would see greater gains in the area of literacy than mathematics. So that was a statewide initiative. We're keeping our eyes open. We know that the state is focusing on things that we can do in the area of mathematics as well.
And that was going to be my next question. Just like you said, the academies are focusing on fractions in particular. Are there state initiatives for improving math? Because it does seem like we focus a lot on the reading portion, but not so much on the.
We had a menu this summer from the state of professional learning opportunities, and some of our teachers took advantage of that. So yes, the state is very much committed to looking at what we can do at the state level. They've also been available. In fact, the State Department liaison has visited our middle school and actually sat and planned with our middle school teachers. So I feel like there is a commitment to really reach out and support the districts. And yes, I don't know everything they have planned, but I do know that math is a focus.
Well, I would also say that the state has put together a curriculum vetting initiative in that they're just trying to make sure that each of the school systems have in place a curriculum that is research-based and that is very much going to achieve results. And the illustrative math is a good example of the math curriculum that we have in place that other school systems that are seeing great gains with their students in math are using. So that's something new that we feel that will be positive for us moving forward as a school system.
The cynic in me says that, because this is the 4th in my short time here, we started with No Child Left Behind and set ridiculous standards that couldn't be met, so we, when I say we, I mean everybody, aborted. Then we went to Common Core. That's gone.
No, it isn't.
But we don't do anything with it, do we?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Park, we're aborting, so now we're going to try something else.
Yep.
I'm just saying that, so that is really comparing apples to oranges. We couldn't say, for example, if we tested off the chart in a good way this year, we really wouldn't be able to compare it to what we did 3 or 4 years ago. So it's really hard to, we could make this data as transparent as we want, but it's hard to evaluate.
I think that's our point, and then that's a really good segue to why we're using MAP. And that's our next slides.
Okay, so, and again, trying to honor your time. In addition to looking at the data from 2019, we also wanted to share tonight quickly where our students ended the year in terms of a local assessment that we give called Measures of Academic Progress. So these are the spring results from the MAP assessment in the area of English Language Arts. What you're looking at quickly here are two different things. The red, basically, the red bar graph is showing you students that scored the 34th percentile or higher, which we categorize those in levels 1 through 5. So 41st percentile would be levels 3, 4, and 5. If a student scored at those levels, they would be part of those results.
They would be proficient.
They would be proficient, and they would be proficient as compared to a nationally normed exam. However, our state exam is much more rigorous. So the blue bar graph represents how those same students would perform on a Maryland state assessment. It's predictive of that. So again, we're looking at the same students, the same assessment, but overall only 31% of our students would score at the proficient level if they were to take the PARCC exam at the end of the year at the same time. So this slide, we wanted to point out those two differences between 3-4-5 versus 4-5, and then also take a look at the commonality in terms of the various subgroups and how they performed. Because one of the things that we're, again, keeping on our radar with every decision we make is to look at not only how all students are doing, but also how some of the student groups are performing in comparison, and are there practices that are not reaching those students where we can better utilize our knowledge and talent within our staff to differentiate, to provide specially designed instruction, and to utilize some of the tools to help see that we can improve those scores. So again, this was just a quick introduction to the local assessment map in the area of English Language Arts. Would you like to take map?
The MAP assessment does many things for us. We give it 3 times a year, beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. It allows us to set goals. These data from the spring are the most current standardized data, standardized, normed against ourselves that we have. So we are building our summer plans against these spring results, knowing that we might need to modify them as we get more data in the fall, but we can't wait until the fall to build our plans for next year. So MAP, the scores come back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The red that you see here, as Gina said, is 3, 4, 5. That represents a child who is approaching or at grade level on this assessment. The blue, 4, 5, are kids who in previous, when we were giving PARCC, students who scored at MAP, on MAP at a 4 or 5 typically were proficient on PARCC. So that's how we use it to predict. But MAP gives us a lot of other data. It tells us specific skills that kids are not performing in. It's child by child. It does individual growth. So for this chart, it's predicting proficiency or showing you the large group, but MAP does many more things for us. The next page shows the same data array, same layout for math. And you'll notice again, the subgroup disparities are there, and we are far less adept at teaching math than we are teaching reading. So the point you made, Francois, what is the focus of the state on that, is a very well taken point. Again, this is what we are sort of using to build our plans. If you would turn, sorry, Bill. I wanted to show you the difference between, so you can understand the difference between MAP, PARCC, and what we think MCAP will look like. The first thing you see, this little bar graph, is a MAP question that measures the standard that's there. Draw a scale picture graph and a scale bar graph to represent a data set. This is a 3rd grade standard in the Common Core State Standards. This is how MAP measures it, okay? If you look at the next slide, it shows you how MCAP measures it. Ms. Sloan's asked 117 4th grade students the question, how many pets do you have? She displayed the data in a bar graph. Part A, how many of the students that responded have 2 pets? Part B, how many more students have 1 pet than students who have 3 pets? Explain your answer. Part C, explain how you use the bar graph to solve the problem. Find the total number of pets the fourth grade students have. Show how you use the bar graph. Show your work using equations. So that is the difference between standard measured on MAP, standard measure on the Maryland State Test. You could ask the question, why do we give MAP? And the answer would be, they cannot answer this complex question if they cannot answer the first question. So MAP gives us the foundational skill data. Do they have the foundational skills that we can then take to a place where they can apply it? Dr. Costa, how this looks in reading is multiple standards. So there could be a standard about character development and a standard about our author's argument, and they would be banged together on our state assessment. How does the author use argument to define the relative characters of these two people? And so that's what happens. And so MAP tells us the foundational data, but then we have to take that further to be ready. And not just Kent County, every district that we're compared to is doing that same process. So
you can see where writing also has to have a front and center focus in the work that we're doing, because if they can't provide a written explanation and show us the thinking, they will not reach proficiency on our state assessment. What we'd like to do at this point is share with you something that you had asked for us to do moving forward, and that was to begin to develop a dashboard that we could share with the public that would present our results and put them out there so that we can set some clear goals and targets for the upcoming school year, both short-term for this year, but also some long-term goals as well. So we wanted to just quickly explain that these are our percentages, our students, the results from our students on spring 2020 measures of academic progress. So it's not the state assessment, we're doing it with the Kent County assessment, but it is nationally normed. And then at the bottom, the results of our kindergarten readiness assessment. Again, this was 2020 information that was posted. It's the last time we had that information at the state level, and how the different various students group perform. One question that we were wanting to know is, do you think that on our dashboard you would like us to include both the 3, 4, 5 and the 4, 5 data, or should we just narrow it where we are posting publicly just the 4, 5, which is proficiency on the state assessment? So I guess, Dr. Couch, I don't know if you want to facilitate this, but we kind of wanted some help in thinking about that.
Right. I think there's a lot of unknowns for us with regard to the new MCAP. We really don't know what's going to be proficient, what is going to determine proficiency in the MCAP. So that was our thinking initially, is that we should really capture the 3, 4, 5s. But I do think we can't lose sight of the 4s and 5s, because we believe that if they do well and they score a 4 and 5, they'll absolutely have proficiency. So we think that there's value in collecting both sets of data. But we wanted to hear from you, with regard to what you thought, and if you had a strong opinion one way or the other.
Could I also ask so this is showing the MAP scores for 3 to 10th, is that correct?
Kindergarten.
Okay.
Through grade 10, yes.
Okay. I think, for me, I would like to see a breakdown by elementary versus middle school versus high school, if that's possible.
And so I guess what I would ask, because again, we've had so much discussion about this, we have one that we would like to push out sort of on the website. That would be everyone, just a quick, if you want a glance of how we're doing as a system, it would give you that big picture. But there is no doubt that we will be publishing additional breakdown information, much richer, much more detail-oriented, and that could either go like on an additional link on the site, or it could go, it's going to be present on the school sites, so you'll be able to see it by grade.
Okay.
One of the things we talked about is, once we come up with this dashboard, then that would be the consistent document that we would use for the system level, but then the schools would then put on their website their individual school data. So, or a link to where you could get that individual. We just didn't want to make it so busy that I mean, if you look at the report card that we get from a school system perspective, there's a report card for the school system, then there's a report card for each school. So we thought it made sense to do it in that way. So you knew where you could gather the data.
Could we also incorporate an identifier like what's on the state data that shows whether these numbers have gone up or down or remained flat?
Well, that's a good idea. It's a great idea.
Yeah, I like the idea of looking at it from a systemic standpoint,
Right, or
one
historic.
overarching, macro level, and then being able to dig down into the different areas.
We did put a disclaimer on the bottom of this, and I just wanted to point that out, that when we administered this assessment, it was still hybrid. So although we had the majority of our students taking it face-to-face, there were still a handful, probably close to 20%, that were taking it in their homes. And I share this because when we gave it at the beginning of the year, when it was reverse and 80% were home, we were in some ways quite surprised when we saw a drop when they returned. So again, just to be aware, not making any statements as to why, but that's something that we noticed. So when they were home, the performance was significantly better. When they came back face-to-face, it dropped. Now we have most back face-to-face, so, we feel like it's probably a pretty good read, at least on, a place for us to begin to set those goals going back when we'll have 100%
Yeah.
back.
And I mean, one can make an assessment that the students received help from family members. I mean, that's at least that's the feeling statewide with regard to the assessments being taken at home. And I don't know that it was a lot of help or just a little bit of help, but every school
Being
system,
comfortable at home,
every
too.
school system noticed that are taking MAP. We're not the only school system that is using MAP, but they noticed that their data was similar in that when the students took the assessments at home, the scores were really high, and then when they came back and took this assessment at school, then they were.
Project.
Yeah, could be. I mean, I don't know, but we have to be mindful that could certainly have affected the data.
In addition, for being the very first year that we publish a dashboard, we also have made a commitment based on your direction to begin to set some targets. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Couch to talk about the next two slides.
So one of the things that we talked about, and we discussed this at our retreat, and this is something we've been discussing at the district level, is that we really need to set targets, and we need to be mindful of where we want to be, set realistic, but not just achievable goals, but something that's going to really spark a commitment from all of us that we need to do better. We need to have a better sense of where we are as a school system and where we need to go moving forward. So these are our first stab, if you want to call it that, in terms of coming up with some goals that we have with regard to where we want to be by 2025. We would like to increase proficiency by 40%. This is at all levels, so we're looking at, making a gain in 40% proficiency. And if we do that, then we reverse engineer it, then that means that by 2022, we need to see a 10% increase. By 2023, we need to see a 20% increase. By 2024, a 30% increase. And by 2025, a 40% increase. And that shows that we are, making that progress. And it's going to be, it's not easily attained because that is something that we're going to have to be mindful of, just simply because of the nature of where we're at and what we have to do in terms of making the progress. But we feel that it needs to be communicated to our community, it needs to be communicated to our families, needs to be communicated to our schools, that this is an expectation and this is what we want to do as a school system. And then the next.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question and sort of make a statement? So can that lofty goal or the increase, can that part of that be that we also make a commitment to corrective action? So let's say we don't make that 10%. What are we going to do about that?
Well, that's all part of a progress
Okay.
monitoring. I mean, and the goal is that we're going to be talking to you about it throughout the year, so we're going to have plenty of opportunity to talk about what we're going to do in terms of, and I think that the biggest goal is that we want to see that change by 2025. We want to see that 40%. So let's just speculate and say we only increase it by 8%. But then the following year, we increase it by 25%, so I think that we need to be somewhat flexible, but those are numbers that we really want to achieve, that's something that we feel strongly, that by 2025, we want to see an increase of 40%.
But we can't get complacent and
No,
think,
we
okay,
can't.
we 8% this year, and then we went 22%, which got us up to the next, and then when we're below, and say, well, we've got another year, we'll make this big
Right,
jump.
no, I'm just saying, I get it. I mean, I think that.
And I get what you're saying too, but I'm
Right.
just saying that we can't be so focused on the end goal.
Right.
That we ignore what's going
right.
on in the immediate.
We have a
Okay.
short-term goal and we have a long-term goal. So, and we felt that it was very important to communicate it clearly on paper and make that commitment, not only on paper, but to our public and to our community, that this is what we have in mind. Now, the next goal that we have in mind is, in order for us to achieve that, we have to be concerned about narrowing the achievement gap. So in order to do that, we propose that we will narrow the achievement gaps in reading and math between all student groups by 50% each year from 2022 to 2025. So,
Can I ask a question? One thing I've been studying is that some of our achievement gaps are simple opportunity gaps as well. So are we committed to narrowing some of those opportunity gaps, making because when we look at the data, it comes down to just students having, like we saw it, having internet versus having the resources to be able to stay after school or come in early.
I
So
think we talked about the wraparound services, increasing the amount of wraparound services. I think that's what we're talking about. We have to be mindful of all of those supports. If in fact this is our lofty goal, that we're going to cut and decrease or narrow the gap by 50%, that's a pretty aggressive goal on our part. But you think about the narrowing, if you looked at the charts that we showed you earlier, you see that a lot of our white students are doing extremely well in our schools. And so we have to be mindful that if we're going to make that progress that we want to see as a school system, then we have to be concerned about all students, and we've got to narrow the gap between all student groups. That means our farm students, those that are in poverty, our African-American students, all of our students that are Hispanic, and so, we have to be very mindful of that. And so those are, now I'll open it up for discussion, but those are the two goals and targets that we would like to set. And we would like to hear your thoughts about where we go from here and what you think about the targets that we've set.
Well, I think one way to narrow these gaps is to just put a tremendous emphasis on proficiency by third grade in reading and writing and math. I just think we've got to do extraordinary things. I don't know how teachers who, a sixth grade teacher is teaching the sixth grade curriculum plus the first, second, third, and fourth and fifth grade curriculum to half the class who's on those different levels. So I think the best way to go about it is to really put a tremendous emphasis on those early grades. I'm glad we've had pre-K. I don't really understand why, after all these years of pre-K, only 54% of the kids are ready for kindergarten. Shouldn't they all be ready after pre-K? So it's those early years, especially, building up vocabulary. I don't know. I think we have to really try to work with parents of kids in these early grades and let them know this matters. They really have to, these kids have to be able to be on grade level by the end of third grade. And we got to do whatever it takes. I haven't seen anything in here about, training volunteers or anything, but I've been on this for years. We have a unique community with a huge number of very well-educated and committed retired people, and they're giving their time and their energy to everything else here except for the public schools. You know, the Sultana and the animal shelter, all kinds of things, the food bank, and I'd love to see some of these people helping our children in these early grades.
Yeah, I would just add that what Trish was on about measurement, right? So how do we, ongoing, what does that look like from a reporting, not reporting back, but actually communicating back, where are we? How are we tracking, you know, so that there's no surprises? Because I think that's going to be key. And I know the dashboard obviously is that measurable and showing that, but I think more in this space, you know, coming out with a tool or something that we can look at and just be mindful of where we are, you know, moving forward.
I think for me, I kind of piggyback on what Dr. Costa said. I'm very, very interested in seeing how this is going to really translate, especially to our elementary level, because that's where we're building those core skills. Dr. Costa does bring up a good point that sometimes, even as an educator myself, students are coming to me on all various different levels, having to reteach, reassess, which is part of my job, don't get me wrong, but really focusing on that. I would really be interested in seeing, you know, each school's student improvement plan. I think that's one thing that we don't get, to see what goals are they setting, what is their SLO goal for the year, what is their criteria for success, and the evidence of learning that they are trying to strive for the year. I think that would be critical for us to see and be reported on and get that information, because that is really critical. Those are our first, you know, they're right there in front of our students. We're just up here developing the policy, trying to develop the strategy, but really getting in there and seeing what they are focusing on, and how does that translate from the one school to the next school, and then what is this is our system-wide goal. But I think seeing just not that, but even as we departmentalize some of the goals, especially in our special education, what is their goal for our students? What is our goal for our student support? I think we have a very, you know, hands-on approach to academic learning for our students.
And again, I'm going to piggyback on Ivy, piggybacking on Wendy, that the idea of finding other ways to establish with parents the importance of these goals, it doesn't have to be pounding them. I mean, we have opportunities to do math nights and things like that. And I will say, as a kid who had math fear, and I would totally be on your fractions list, having the parents in the room in an after-school activity where everybody is doing the math, including a parent who is seeing how it's being done, the expectation of it, and how rewarding it is for their child, is a great way to bring the community in and socialize with the reading as well. I think it's also kind of a way for teachers to gauge where the parents are on some of those skill levels as well. So I think that's good information to have. So having more opportunities like that would be good.
I'm glad that we're setting targets. I mean, that to me is a big first step, and we have to be able to not just talk the talk, we got to walk the walk. A little bit of what Dr. Costa said about tutors and other help. You know, we open up our schools to character education. We let the community members come in and read and other things. I don't know why we can't open up our schools for regular education. And, you know, teachers can only do so much. And like Dr. Costa says, in one classroom, you could have 3 or 4 different abilities there. It is helpful to be able to pull one kid aside and give them a little one-on-one attention. So, it's something I've been harping on a little bit for the last couple of years. I don't know why we don't accept help when it's offered. It's not like volunteers and community members haven't said in the past that they'd like to come and help us. So I would like to see Kent County Public Schools be a little bit more welcoming and inviting to the community. We need all the help we can, everybody needs all the help they can get.
May I make a comment, Dr. Couch? One of the things that we think is going to help us with the coordination of those that are interested in supporting our schools is next year, 2 additional schools will have positions because they are concentration of poverty schools that will have community liaisons. And that's going to be so, so helpful in terms of making the immediate time and attention, giving that immediate time and attention to someone who perhaps is coming into the office to say, I want to help. That community liaison will be able to listen to them, look at their schedule, their timing, our needs, and help make that match.
When you say next year, do you mean the school
This
year?
year, I'm
Okay,
sorry,
so-
21, 22.
Which is what
Yes.
Dr. Costa has been, basically
Yes.
talking about
So
a
we'll have
volunteer
3.
coordinator.
So we'll
Okay.
have 3 schools that have it.
Well, that's
Yep.
awesome.
Yep.
But we also need to get the word out to let the public know, you know what? We will accept your help.
Yeah.
It can't be a secret.
So public comment?
Okay, any further comments? I know we have public participation, and we are running.
We can run a little late, I
That's
think.
great.
I think, because I don't see a bunch of people coming in for the next meeting, so we can run a little late.
Ms. Manley, do we have any,
Comments?
okay.
Want to,
Thank you. I'll step down. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Jacqueline.
thank you, thank you. You want to come up? Yeah, come on.
Sure,
Yeah,
please.
I didn't come prepared to speak or ask any questions, but I do have a few. I graduated from Kent County High School, and my daughter just graduated, is headed off to school. Very proud of her, and I'd like to thank some of the teachers that she's had, such as Mr. Evans, Ms. Walters, amazing people. Sorry, I get a little nervous. I'm a nurse. I work the pandemic. It's affected so many people. It affected me, it affected my family, but thanks to amazing teachers, we got through it. As the new principal, I hope you have a plan besides waiting to speak to a social worker before school starts. I think you should come up with your own to get ready for the challenges that you might have continued from COVID. My big question is, when's the opportunity for dialogue? Questions should be asked during meetings. There should be questions that are answered during work groups. In everyday conversation, I should be able to approach any of you in the community and ask a question and get an answer. I should be able to email you and get a response. This year I did send some questions in, never got a response. Very disappointing. I wish I had been more involved while my daughter was a student. She's graduated, but I plan to be very involved moving forward. I've learned so many things paying attention in the past few months. I have a lot of disappointments. I am disappointed in the reading program, and I have been since elementary school. When I went to Kent County Public Schools, and especially in high school, we read at least 3 books. We wrote a paper, we had a test, and we did an oral presentation. And my daughter Cameron, sometimes I think there was maybe 1 book she had to read in the summer. I remember in elementary school, I butted heads with her reading teacher because she was reading a book that was at a higher level than what the curriculum showed, and we talked about that. She had already started learning to read before she started elementary school, and the picture walking that they did and the book list was way below her reading level, and I think it's been that way the entire way through. I think that you need to come up with a better plan to increase literacy. I think you need to require people to read more. There should be some sort of accountability for not doing the work, and that includes with teachers and administrators as well. Like, if things are failing, I think that you all need action plans too. As a nurse, if I'm not doing my job, I have an action plan that I have to bring things up to speed, or I could be suspended as a nurse. I feel like it should happen with teachers, administrators, and Board of Education. My next question is, just in reviewing the slides for the ESSR, the ESSER program, there's not one mention of the budget, there are no dollar figures on it, and there are no amounts discussed. So I hope that when you do your presentation, you actually do talk money, because $5 million is a lot of money. So please, if you haven't decided to speak about that, make some adjustments, because we're here now to talk this through and work
yeah, that's the
work
next
it out, and
meeting.
it's not listed on your slides at all. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next portion of the meeting tonight is the notification of the very next meeting that's going to be held right after this. That next meeting of the Board of Education of Kent County is a reopening plan for FY 2022 and the ESSER 3 community session. The meeting will be held following this board work session. Today is July 22nd, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. The next monthly meeting of the Board of Education of Kent County will be held on August 9th, 2021, beginning at 5:30 p.m. with the open session. Open session will be immediately followed by the board members going into closed session. The open session will resume at 6:30 p.m. This meeting will be located here in this building, the administrative building, in this room, the boardroom, 5608 Boundary Avenue, Rock Hall, Maryland, 21661. The last item on the agenda for this meeting is to adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Sullivan. Any further comments, questions?
Are we going to be able to take like a 5-minute break?
We'll take a 5-minute break, and then
We'll
we'll
go
start
5.
the next one.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Excuse me,
Aye.
favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Thank you.
So just let them know we're going to take a 5-minute break.
We'll be out for 5 minutes and we'll be right back.